to another awesome episode of Rock Talk with DocRocker. I am joined with DocRocker and a special guest, of course, Denton. What we got today, and what are we talking about?
So in the spirit of doing our genre talks, covering different sublets of rock and metal, we figured we got lots of people involved in the Facebook group that want to be part of the conversation. We've had a lot of really awesome conversations going on. One of the first of which is my friend here, Jeremy Petrachonis, who is a local artist in the Hazleton area. Super well known, has an awesome portfolio of stuff. You got to check him out. Jeremy, do you have like a website or something we can plug on our channel?
I actually do. It's ironically my name. It's jpabstractart.com.
Yeah, so check out jpabstractart.com and you could see some real killer artwork from our fellow friend and metalhead here, Jeremy. So in the spirit of genre talks, we're gonna cover a real dicey one this time. We're gonna look at glam metal from like
I was so undecided about what to wear today for shirts. I mean, I got a Lemmy one, which will play a role in the next topic. But I was very undecided, man. I have Motley Crue, I got Guns N' Roses. I got so many band T-shirts from that era. I'm like, man, which one do I wear? And we chose Lemmy because he's a god, so it's all good.
Yeah, it works.
Funny you're talking about what to wear, and a lot of stuff from glam metal really is just about an image.
Right.
Rock, if you took away what they looked like, you took away what they dressed like, a lot of glam rock is just hard rock. Mm-hmm. And people dressing in lipstick and pieced up hair.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, I like to point out the fact that Twisted Sister and a band like Cinderella, they don't sound like Poison or Faster Pussycat, but they're all considered glam rock or hair metal band. Mm-hmm. You take the makeup away from Twisted Sister, they're a rock band.
Exactly, right? Yeah, the glam image made it, man. I mean, hell, from Motley Crue, then you had Rat, you had Poison, which ironically isn't far away from us. Yeah, Rat, Poison.
Yeah, Rat's totally glam metal.
And there's Van Halen, of course. I don't know. I'm guessing they'd fall in the glam and hard rock. They're just kind of in the middle. But
I guess technically, yeah. Although I guess a lot of people don't really consider Van Halen himself much of like a glam metal guy.
Ironically, I don't know if you guys are Motley Crue fans, but the Dirt movie, they actually have David Lee Roth in the movie. Not David Lee Roth himself, but they make a jab at him doing cocaine, which is pretty interesting.
That's a great movie. Fantastic movie.
It's looking good.
Right.
Great.
Well, you know what? Before we go any further, let's talk about what actually glam metal and glam rock and hair metal is. I'm going to pull this from some things that I looked up on the internet as the week went by when we first decided we're going to do this topic. Glam rock, it's a style of rock music developed in the 1970s. We're talking costumes, makeup, hairstyles, pop-influenced hooks, guitar riffs. You got to look at like 1970s David Bowie, Gary Glitter, New York Dolls, Queen, and then that transferred into like 80s hair metal, which is just a heavier version.
It's two of the same thing practically.
Whether or not hair metal is an evolution of glam rock is up for debate.
Sure.
But
I gotta admit, I feel like hair metal kind of just took it to the streets practically. I mean, you had some fierce ass bands come out of that era, from glam and the hair metal, but it's kind of the same thing basically.
Yeah, and like I said before, it's more of what they look like than their sound. Because you mentioned Motley Crue already. Their first two albums were pretty heavy. They're pretty heavy rock albums.
Yes, they are. Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially Too
They
Fast
have
for
some
Love.
real hard riffs that slap, and they're one of the earliest bands that play with a lower tuning on the guitars. They do all their stuff in D standard instead of E. So
exactly,
a full
right.
Step lower, and typically, I mean, and this is coming from like a big nu metal guy, but like usually lower denotes heavier. So like the lower you tune your strings, the heavier you get. And that even goes into a little bit of our brief prog rock talk from last week of, some of like the early gent stuff from the mid to late 2000s into 2010 and beyond. Most of it's characterized by, you at least need 7 strings in your guitar to even be considered into the genre. And I feel like that kind of, not to say it takes its root and its precedence in like glam rock and heavy or hair metal from like the 70s and 80s, but it's definitely some of the first instances where you start to see experimentation with the tunings. For whatever reasons that may be, I really don't know. So anyone who is like super kind of techie and guru on that kind of stuff and knows the reasons why, let let us know in the comments. You know, why do they tune the guitars to E flat standard in the first place? You know, is it to accommodate for a singer's range? Is it for just a lower, heavier sound? Is it just to be different? Who knows? I really don't. But I'm losing sleep over it. It keeps me up at night. Like, why do they tune lower? I mean, I love it.
I think it's great.
It sounds great.
I think it's the vocalist range, because they're always singing higher, so you're going to tune down. It's going to be easier to hit
lower, you know.
That's always the assumption I've made, and that's always what like when I explain alternate tunings, like when I'm teaching guitar lessons to kids, I always explain, oh yeah, it's usually to accommodate for whether you want to play something in a different key, but still stick with like the guitar-friendly keys like E and A, but you want to play with different keys. That's another reason, but mainly it's to accommodate a singer's range if they don't want to hit as high a notes. I know when we, Jeff, we went to see a couple years ago, we went to see Megadeth headline with Amon Amarth.
I'm so jealous.
One of the opening Metal Church was there, Butchered Babies. It was an awesome lineup, and something I noticed, because I wasn't really into Megadeth at the time, I just went because it was like, well, yeah, why not? I went because of Amon Amarth. I'm a big Amon Amarth fan, but I was floored by the Megadeth show naturally, and it turned me on to Dave Mustaine and all of his stuff, and it was cool because the friend I went with, who's going to be another featured guest in the future, we'll talk about him later, but he was showing me like all this like really cool Megadeth stuff. He's like, here's all my favorite albums, here's all my favorite tracks, blah blah blah, and I noticed a lot of this stuff was in E standard, and then when we went to the show, everything was down a step, and it's like, oh yeah, it's probably just because he's not used to singing up that high anymore, because he's been doing it for how many years. So
yeah, exactly.
Vocal range is the most obvious reason, but I'm sure there are other reasons, and I'd love to start that conversation. That can be a whole other topic, getting into different tunings, and I'd love to.
It really can.
In a later episode.
It sounds so crunchy, you know. It's some of the riffs that you could write, you know. It's so different
and
from
going
music.
Going back to Motley Crue, some of their stuff really slaps pretty hard, and I've always viewed that like, well, these guys are real heavy, and you know, I only have like a sample platter of some of their stuff, but everything I've heard by them, I was like, wow, these guys are really good. It's like trashy, and it's, you know, you got like girls and like all this stuff. Like, for me, like it sounds great, you know, and like Jeff said, you take the imagery away, and it's like it's just real good hard rock.
It's hard rock before hard rock fully existed, you know. It's crazy.
Making it a little more accessible, and yeah, it's great, you know. So we could definitely talk a little more about Motley Crue. Do we want to do that, or do you want to shuffle around some other bands?
Well, you know, Motley Crue is one of those bands that they weren't defined by that label hair metal, really. When I was back when I was younger, okay, because I'm a little bit older than you guys remember. Like, you know, they went through that glam phase. Then they went through like their biker phase when they did girls. You know, they had all the leather.
Strip club, you know.
Tougher. But as they tried to look more and more tough, we'll say, their music kind of got softer and more pop-oriented, like all the hair metal bands did. By 1990, everything was so overproduced and oversaturated. Everyone had a ballad. Everything sounded the same. You know, and so because a lot of
acoustic guitar stuff, Guns N' Roses are the biggest culprits of that.
Guns N' Roses really did it. I mean, Guns N' Roses is my favorite classic band, so you know, they really experimented with what happened there, and you know,
Guns N' Roses' first album, though, Appetite for Destruction, was a gritty, raw rock. You know, that was a rock album, and that's something I can listen to right now. I can put that on. There's not a bad note on that album. That's from beginning to end. Appetite for Destruction. Just as good now as it was way back then.
I don't even skip a track on it. Every single track on that is awesome. And all the lore that goes into, like the first 6 songs being like the Guns and the second 6 being the Roses, you know, kind of leading into all that kind of stuff. Looking at some of the early artwork from like the cassette tapes when they dropped.
I mean,
I instantly fell in love with these guys. Guns N' Roses was always one of those bands for me. Like every time I've like heard one of their hits come on like a rock station or something, of course they always play like Welcome to the Jungle or Sweet Child of Mine, but like every time I heard it, it's like, wow, this is really good kind of heavy stuff. I should give those guys a listen. And like years went by and I never did. So I finally did, and I picked up Appetite because it had like the songs I was familiar with. I didn't know anything about the band at that time. I didn't know it was their first album.
You probably got blown away, right?
I totally blew my mind, and like every single song was just like hit after hit after hit, and like it's got so much attitude, and the riffs are fantastic. And you know, my favorite song on it was My Michelle, because of the opening lyric, and just because of that, the nature of that guitar riff is just something. Everything about every aspect of the band at that point was like the pinnacle of what metal should be like in the 80s. I thought
it's kind of crazy too.
I gotta check out the rest of their stuff, and I like did a whole big thing on Facebook about it when I was first getting into them. Like, oh my god, I'm just getting into Guns N' Roses, and like everyone was commenting, yeah, Appetite's all you need. Don't even bother with the other stuff. Everything everything else sucks. And I'm like, that's not fair to say. So
I
sure
know,
enough,
right?
I picked up Use Your Illusion. I picked up the Spaghetti Incident. I picked up pretty much everything. And I listened to all the rest of it, and like that fire was just a wet blanket just right over, like, oh wow, what happened to these guys? Like, they were this such an awesome, like, heavy balls to the wall metal with so much attitude. And
it's like I said, man, they surrounded themselves with yes men. When you don't have somebody that's going to challenge you, usually your art suffers for it. And Axl surrounded himself with yes men. It's the George Lucas syndrome. I'm telling you. After Appetite, he surrounded himself with yes men, and the product. It's still pretty good. There's still a lot of stuff on Use Your Illusion.
Great. Yeah,
a couple tracks are really solid.
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing like Appetite. There's nothing like Appetite for Destruction. I think I was in like 8th grade when it came out. That's how old I am. About 8th grade.
I think it's crazy.
It was new. It blew our minds. Man, it was something.
Yeah,
and we all got in trouble for wearing the Guns N' Roses T-shirts because there's a naked lady on the back, stuff like that.
Exactly, and
I feel like that sentence right there is the pinnacle of like what hair metal is all about. Like you said in the beginning, the image. Image is an important factor.
We tossed that question out on the Facebook group, like, what is the quintessential hair band or hair metal album of the 80s? And we got a lot of varied responses.
From Bon Jovi.
I mean, I don't think Bon Jovi was mentioned in any of the responses, though.
Oh, shit.
Poison.
Rob and me, Slippery When Wet and all that. Hey, wow.
That's a great album, man. Poison was mentioned a lot. Cinderella Night Songs.
Oh, it's Skid Row.
Skid Row a couple times was mentioned.
That's a damn good album.
I'm gonna go with Poison. Look What the Cat Dragged In, and open up and say they were probably the two ones that I say really encapsulates what hair metal is. Cinderella Night Songs. There's not a bad song on that. If you guys ever get into Cinderella, again, their image is very glammy, very hair. Those guys are from Philly, so but there's a lot of blues. There's a lot of blues influence on those albums. Cinderella Night Songs and Long Cold Winter, they're both great albums. Again, take away the image, they're great rock albums. So I'm going to go with them, as far as like what I think glam metal would be Poison, Cinderella, and then Appetite. I'll throw Appetite in there because they used to keep up their hair like crazy and wear makeup. Hey, even Slayer wore makeup in the 80s. Did you know that?
Ironically, even Pantera wore makeup and everything when they started. That's technically thrash, but they were a glam band when they started.
And those albums are good. Right? Man. Power metal with Phil is excellent, man. The other, oh god, I can't remember the other ones. Something about a jungle. They have real bad album covers. I remember that.
They had some crazy album covers from what I remember. And then they got straight up in the thrash.
They were a glammy band, at least they looked like one, but they were still pretty heavy. Those albums are still pretty heavy, but they it was the image, Exactly. So, at the end of the 80s, I lived through it in 1988. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the film Decline of the Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years. If you guys haven't seen it, watch the documentary. It's fantastic. It's they captured the LA music scene. And most of the bands weren't very good. And most of them came off as jerks. And so, to me, I think that's where the backlash for a lot of this hair band stuff started at the end of the 80s. But points for Megadeth.
Hair band.
Yeah, Megadeth was in it. So that's it's a good film, though. If you guys ever want to see what Hollywood looked like back in the 80s, it's a pretty good film. And then, of course, in 1991, Nevermind came out. And then MTV wanted grunge bands.
Everybody wanted grunge and alternative, and then hair metal and glam died practically.
When you define grunge, by definition, it was a response to like the height of the hair metal movement. It was like, let's take all that fluff and filigree away, and let's do something like real raw and unadulterated, something that's really low key and down to earth. And it's that whole generation gap thing of like it's a response. It's like anti everything that was the 80s became what grunge became. But
you name it, Alice in Chains, all that good stuff. Mother Love Bone.
Mm-hmm. Soundgarden.
I like the Mother Love Bone album. I think that was really good. I was really into that.
Pearl Jam, so that's not too bad.
I like the first Pearl Jam. When it came out, I loved all that stuff. I mean, I loved the Nirvana's Nevermind album. Alice in Chains is a great band. Still are. Soundgarden, I mean, how could you deny, Chris Cornell? Pearl Jam, first couple albums were good, but the thing that made me kind of sad was what it did to the glam rock bands, because they were all out of a job. No one wanted to listen to them.
They were all just screwed, and they had to start doing some new stuff and changing their tunings and changing the songs. And some of them made it, but many just crumbled.
Some of them stuck around for a little while into the 90s.
Like Guns N' Roses kind of had the right idea when I think about it when they went to Use Your Illusion, because at that point in time, that was right around the Nevermind era, so they kind of already went right into the mainstream fully. And God, like Appetite's great. I love all the Guns N' Roses albums. Personally, I own them too. Favorite classic band, of course, and seen them many times live with the reunion. But yeah, I gotta say, I think Use Your Illusion, it came out of nowhere, and they had a lot of the songs done since Appetite's sessions. But the fact that they transitioned so well, they kind of predicted where the music scene was going. And many people will say they're sellouts, but they kind of just went with what was in music, and you can't really blame them.
They were pretty unaffected by all this. They were pretty unaffected by all
they were basically, they went right across and skate free.
Molly Crew didn't survive really, all these bands, But there's still bands doing this kind of style today. Like you got the Darkness, Buck Cherry. I'll still say that they're a glam band. Just the way they play kind of harkens back to that sound. Steel Panthers, perfect.
Steel Panthers is definitely the band everyone looks at for glam. I have a feeling they're probably gonna bring glam metal back. I'd say at that point, because they're basically just the same as any '80s band at that point. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. That's all that scene was practically.
Hair metal's
still good music, man. Still
good music. Still good music. Like, it's so many classics, and it's crazy how music transitioned. And it's ironic that we're gonna go to thrash metal, because around the time that glam metal happened, thrash was already kind of rocking overseas, and they came here, and then obviously we know the big four, and then it kind of just happened at the end of the 80s and then went into the 90s. So it's kind of cool. I know when Danton gave me the topics, I was like, wow, glam and thrash. I'm like, well, shit, let's just talk about those two. That sounds fucking great.
I personally went back and I listened to some of these albums that I haven't listened to in 25 plus years. And what I found is like, they're great albums. Okay, yeah, they're a little softer than I even remembered, but Poison's albums are solid. Rat, like you mentioned, they have so many hits on all their albums. Right. There's another one.
Yep.
I gotta mention Twisted Sister. Stay Hungry. It's a fantastic album.
Exactly. Yep. D. Snyder's the fucking man.
Rest in peace to my old drum instructor AJ Perro. That man taught me more in 6 months than like other teachers taught me in probably 6 years. He's such a fantastic drummer. They're such a great band that really got lumped in because of their image. But they're a rock band. And Stay Hungry, beginning to end, man, that's a solid album. And again, I'll mention Cinderella's Night Song. Not a bad song on there. If you guys haven't really checked that out, Long Cold Winter's I think even better. It's more bluesy influence, more hard rock influence, it's closer to like an AC/DC album than a Warrant album. And again, Warrant they have a pretty solid 2 or 3 album catalog. Before they jumped on the '90s grunge bandwagon, and then whatever.
Exactly. They just kind of went for the ride, and that was it.
Yeah.
And which Cinderella album has You Don't Know What You Have Till It's Gone? What album is that?
That's Long Cold Winter.
That's Long Cold. I was gonna say, okay, so I've heard that album. I heard a little bit of the Night album. I was just trying to figure it out because I hear it all the time on Sirius XM, and I'm like, yeah. And I hear like 4 other songs of Cinderella. And I'm like, damn, which album is this from? I can't fucking remember the.
They're both really good. They're both really solid albums, and I'm surprised when I went back to listen to them how good they were.
Yep. Yeah, it's just the classics, and you see all these bands starting to even like call it a career nowadays. I mean, ironically, Firehouse is still around. Yeah. Cinderella's kind of still around. Obviously, Kiss is trying to finish their final End of the Road tour.
I saw them like 20 years ago on their End of the Road tour.
Exactly. You're talking the one that was on pay-per-view, right? That whole I remember that when the Kiss farewell thing with Skid Row was opening and they kicked Sebastian Bach out and he's like, yo, you're never big enough to open for Kiss. Yeah, I was gonna say there's so many bands around anymore. Motley Crue wants to do the stadium tour. Who knows when the hell that's even gonna be possible? Because I had tickets for that, and Guns N' Roses with Smashing Pumpkins. But
Ooh, that would have been an awesome show.
I know it's
Eventually.
still rescheduled for next August, apparently.
Yeah, well, hopefully by then the world kind of reverts a little bit back to some sense of normalcy. You know,
Hopefully.
I hope
you know,
so.
if we find a cure for this thing and they come up with a vaccine by the spring, like they're saying they might, then who knows? By the end of the summer, we might be back to actually going to concerts and festivals.
Maybe.
And we can.
Hey.
That would be nice. That would be
All
nice.
I know is summer
there's lots of bands
2022.
I gotta see. I never saw Guns N' Roses live yet. I wanted to a couple years ago.
Dude, oh
I
man.
passed on the chance to do so.
Oh, they're
And I
so.
regret it because I was like, I got to go see them now that they're like real back in full swing.
I saw Guns N' Roses before Sweet Child was even released. They opened for Aerosmith at the Pocono Downs in Wilkes-Barre. They were fantastic, man. They came out, they did a 45-minute set.
Historical
They were,
shit right there.
I'm gonna probably get some flack for saying this, but like when I was like growing up and like first getting into like music in general, like, you know, Johnny Cash was like a big name that always came up. And it's
Of course,
you have all this
Man in
imagery
Black's
of him
always
like
there.
flipping off the camera and saying this and saying that. And then you listen to the music and it's like this like real slow kind of chicken picking country kind of stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't really match the image at all.
Yeah.
So for me, Guns N' Roses was like an answer to that. It's like, this is what I want. And you get that like, why don't you just F off? And then like that awesome guitar solo comes in and it's like so heavy and that descending bass line is just so killer, man. And the first time I heard that, it made me make that real
These hurts hit you, you know?
Yeah, it hit me in the face and I loved it. And I looped that album cover to cover countless times for like a year, like an entire year.
The remaster is pretty good too.
Yeah.
You know, here's something funny. So my birthday's October 17th. Okay. And I'm pretty sure Use Your Illusion came out like 2 weeks before I was born. I think something around there.
Nice.
And then I became like this huge Guns N' Roses fan, and they're my favorite classic band. So it's kind of weird. And
the stars aligned. You were born to be a Guns N' Roses fan.
I was born to be a rocker, the abstract rocker too. But well, let's see, it's September 25th. So I feel like in about a year's time, we might have a remaster of Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, and we might also get to see that 3-hour. God, like the 3-hour Use Your Illusion tour thing they shot but never released because they were all drugged up and just then the band fell apart and
probably
you know the band fell apart and egos and drugs just happened and you know
they got in their own
Chinese democracy kind of tried to happen. You know, yeah, rock and roll. But
whether that's fortunate or unfortunate, that's part
unfortunate. Yeah, it's like damn, man, it's crazy knowing how big they were and they just imploded. And then like the thing with Motley Crue was, you know, they were like high as hell in many ways, and then all of a sudden like 93 or so comes around, they boo Vince Neil out of the band, they get John Corabi.
I like John Corabi though, man. That album's pretty good. He's a great
vocalist. It's pretty heavy,
I'll
admit. It's different.
Yeah, it wasn't Motley Crue though.
Yeah, it definitely was a Motley Crue. It was something different. It was cool. I would love to see Vince Neil try to do the Corabi stuff. I don't think that's ever going to happen.
No, never.
I mean, Vince Neil, you know, Big Mac 103. That's kind of like the modern day jokes for Vince Neil, and he's always trash. But I hope he pulls it together for the tour. I hope he does, because damn, that bill is just stacked. He had Def Leppard and everything, and Joe Jett. I can't.
That was gonna be a great tour. Hopefully, it's still happening.
Yep, still happening. I think it got pushed to next year, and I'm like, of course, you know, totally off topic, but like, I really wanted to see Ozzy Osbourne, but between the pandemic and the fall, man, I just feel so bad for him right now.
If you get a chance to see him, if he does play again, go see him because he's great, and I don't know how much longer he's gonna do it.
Dude, I don't know how much longer he has to even live. It's sad. I'm really concerned. You know,
well, his album that he did. That was
lost in 40.
The closest he got to glam was probably the Ultimate Sin album. He was very glammed up on that tour. Shot in the Dark is the big song from that. They're very glam. If you watch any of the videos from that era, very glammed up, but it's still an Ozzy album. So let's wrap up. Final thoughts on hair bands, glam metal. What do you guys think? What's your final thoughts on this whole genre of music?
Jeremy?
You know, I think it was a pretty damn good movement in music. I mean, you went from like the very classic classic kind of stuff like Frank Sinatra and everything, and the Rolling Stones, and it kind of was just building. And then in the 80s, it just happened, between aggression and fashion and makeup and just unlimited amounts of hairspray. It was just possible, and hair defied gravity, and it was just something else, between the tunings, to how crunchy things were, to how down and gritty it was. I mean, it went from being all fashionable, and then at the end of the 80s, it went to being just, an all-out bar fight practically with bands. And I think it's definitely worth it for how it took over the scene. It took over Hollywood. It took over the Strip. And even to this day, from going to Hollywood and exhibiting and stuff, like, you still see prominent parts of that scene there, just in a modern standpoint. And I think it definitely left its niche in history. I'd like to see glam metal make a return. I have a feeling Steel Panther is going to be the band to do that. And, you have Black Veil Brides and other bands that could easily get that. And I think there's a future for hair and glam metal somewhere, somehow. Good times.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much the best way you could possibly sum it up, with a really good summary of all of the aspects of what make it what it was and what it still is to people that are really into it, as well as that nice sense of hope for the future, and that same thing goes true for pretty much any rock and metal.
Even
genre.
new metal starting to make a return.
Especially genres that have had their heyday for a brief time period and come and gone. There's always that hope that some band will find a way to bring that sound back, and it might hit the mainstream in another way, and it might create a second wave of, there might be a second wave of hair metal. There might be a second wave of there might be there probably is a second wave of thrash, isn't there?
Like Power Trip, God Rest Riley's Soul.
Yeah.
Power Trip is definitely starting that, and new metal is easily starting to come around, glam. So I feel like maybe about 5 years time
comes around, and I think all of us metalheads out in the world have a lot to look forward to. Absolutely. So, Jeff, what about you? What are your final thoughts?
I love hair bands. I love glam rock. It was a really, really great time in my life because I went through high school, in the 80s. I graduated in 91. So I was graduating. I was seeing the tail end of it. I did see it get way too overproduced and overblown. But when I go back and I look at this stuff, man, there's some really great memories there, because that's one of the things that this music does for me, is bring back a lot of really good memories of when I was a kid, when I was younger, when I was first learning how to play the drums. Man, I would play that Poison album, that first Poison album. I've learned the entire Appetite for Destruction. I learned that because I couldn't get enough of that. Plus I did like some heavier stuff, but the whole thing is, it was good, fun, good time music, man. It was very positive too. That was another thing. There wasn't a lot of darkness in these songs. So
exactly.
Hopefully, I think that's what the world needs right now. Some good fun,
some good fluffy, happy songs, and
yeah. Put on a hair metal
thing.
album and just have a nice party with yourself in your house. That's all you need, is some good music.